Coming up on the Doctor's Hospital podcast.
Parents can help by listening. When you listen, you want to be able to talk with your children, but also share stories to help guide them. Because what they're looking for is they're changing over time from modeling to learning.
Experience the immediate care you deserve at Doctor's Hospital Urgent Care. When emergency strikes, trust our expert physicians for fast, quality care. With extended hours and cutting-edge medical technology, we're always ready to serve you. Don't wait or take risks with your health. Visit our urgent care suite at Doctor's Hospital West on Blake Road for immediate, trusted, and best care.
Welcome to the Doctor's Hospital podcast. I'm your host, Alexis Burrows, Marketing Director at Doctor's Hospital. And today we are continuing our Back to School podcast series with none other than Dr. Edrica Richardson of Richardson Psychotherapeutic and Consultants Limited. She is here today to talk about social skills and extracurricular development in the school system for our students. Welcome to the show, Dr. Richardson. It's been a while since we've had you on. I think the last time we spoke on the podcast was 4 years ago.
I know. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me back. And yes, I'm excited.
Yeah, I know.
A lot of things have, changed within the environment in which we had the first conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep. I mean, I know you've written a book since we've last spoken as well. So a lot of big things happening in the background and in the foreground. So congratulations on that. I'll give you an opportunity to plug that in detail at the end if you like. But I'm excited to talk to you about this as I have a 6-year-old who is, navigating what it's like to be in the school environment. And, I feel like school is so much more competitive nowadays than it was back when I was in St. Thomas More many, many years ago. So it's interesting to kind of have this conversation as a parent. Because even when we last spoke, my kid was 2. So this is an entirely different ball game now. You running around in daycare, nobody cares, right? You just want to make sure the kid is alive and developing somewhat properly. But now you're thinking about all of the different things that come into play and how everything works together. So for me as a parent, I imagine it's going to be an interesting conversation as well. But again, happy to have you on. So let's just dive right in. So one of the things I want to talk about is healthy friendships in that school environment for kids. Kids encounter all kind of different people when they go into the school environment from different backgrounds, different belief systems. But I imagine even despite all of that, there are certain hallmarks of what a healthy friendship looks like amongst kids. So can you walk us through some of what are those healthy characteristics? And then how can parents help to develop those characteristics?
Yes. So much has changed. As you said, school life is different. It feels more competitive. Honestly, it is. When I hear parents, even before they give birth, talking about what schools the kid may go to because they have to put on a list. This is how much we know school has changed. And so in preparation for all of that, I want to remind parents too that you can have some thoughts prior to, but don't overplan things because you want to make sure you're tailoring things towards each child because each child's needs are going to be different. But one thing across the board remains the same is that all kids need healthy friendships. And those are friendships that can help each other cope and thrive. So those are nurturing relationships. So we call it nurturance is one thing we look for in healthy friendships. Then there's trust and loyalty, which means that friends can be truthful and even have moments where they can disclose to one another, because that's a part of having friendships, right? You could tell a little secret here, or you can talk about things together that you're navigating similarly. Healthy friendships involve people who are kind. So kindness is a big part of friendships. Friends teach each other things like love, compassion, kindness. And one of the important things is empathy. And empathy is a skill. I always like to tell people that empathy is not something we're born with, but it's something we learn over time. So empathy happens when friends can understand how others feel and put themselves in another person's shoes, right? So, the kids who are playing on the playground and it's my turn, and understanding that we need to share, but we also knows how it feels to be left out of a situation sometimes with friend groups. And one of the most important ones, I think, is respecting differences. So one of the things you mentioned is that when kids go to school, they have to navigate the differences that they're going to experience.
Mhm.
And one of those things is teaching your child that they should respect those differences. Every person is not going to be alike. There may be some kids in your classrooms who may have like learning disabilities, or maybe a little slower in math than they are in English, or
Right.
maybe that this is their first time being in a bigger class environment now, right? Versus a smaller school. And so you want to teach your kids to recognize that difference exists and difference is okay. And differences aren't a bad thing. And we should really embrace that because we never know what we're going to learn.
Mhm.
And so those are some healthy characteristics when we think about friendship: that nurturance, that trust and loyalty, kindness, that empathy, and that respect for differences.
Mhm.
So parents help that and help children by modeling. That's the first thing parents need to do. You can't expect your kid to do something you're not showing them that you're capable of doing, because we know that the first level of learning comes from modeling behavior. What they see
Mhm.
you do, they imitate. So parents can show children how they treat their friends, how to be a good friend. So what are you doing to show them that this can happen? Then parents can have conversations with their children, discuss qualities of friendships and how to choose good friends when you go to school. And, do you make sure you talk to everybody in the class? Don't
Mhm.
isolate yourself and only talk to some. Parents can help by listening. I know a lot of times parents think they only want to talk, but they also got to remember to listen to their children. And when you listen, you want to be able to talk with your children, but also share stories to help guide them.
Mhm.
Because what they're looking for is they're changing over time from modeling to learning. And because of that, you change from being the person who tells them everything to do, but guides them into the right direction.
Mhm.
Then you role play. Sometimes parents can role play with their children when they have friendship issues. So, next time you and Sally are on the playground and she wants your stuff, you do this versus that. You don't know when to go seek help, all those
Mhm.
things. Provide opportunities as well, parents can do, which means that you want to encourage them to work and play together. Maybe you foster friendships for your children by having play dates. Have them in other events that they can make and foster relationships, not only within their family, but outside of their family and outside of school as well, too. Different environments help that. And you want to, again, encourage diversity in friendship. Parents can support those diverse friend groups, those friend circles, by helping your children avoid situations where they shy away from interactions with others. One of the things we see growing a lot right now with children is this kind of social anxiety. And a lot of it's
Mhm.
because they don't have opportunities to create friend spaces outside of electronics. So we want to make sure that they're still getting out there and doing the good old fashioned play. Play is healthy for
Yeah.
children in healthy and normal development.
Yeah. Obviously, we're living in a post-pandemic world where I think COVID and everything that came along with that kind of it removes a lot of the easy access to those sorts of things. I think in some ways, we've not really gotten back to the concept of that sort of engagement with people in terms of in-person play and things like that. And I think we can see it with the generation of kids that's starting to come up now, the COVID babies. And it's different. It's different from what our childhoods might have looked like because of things like dealing with COVID and stuff like that. So it is an interesting space to navigate. I guess which brings me to my next question. How can parents identify and support their children if they're struggling with friendships? Now, that could be that, they're not easily making friends, or, maybe sometimes they go to the opposite spectrum and everyone's their friend, which can also be troublesome, I imagine. So how can parents identify that and support their kids depending on where they are?
First thing they have to do is understand what social skills are. Have you taught your child how to communicate?
Mm-hmm.
Have you taught them how to share? Especially, let's say you grew up in a household where you're an only child. Have they had opportunities to share with you? Maybe they don't have another sibling or a cousin, but they can share with you, learning how to share and play with toys and other items. Have you taught them how to resolve conflict?
Mm-hmm.
So those are all social skills, and things like apologizing. Those are the basics that parents can start with and helping them if they're struggling. And so one of the ways, again, to do this is you want to create role-playing activities where you can help your child practice this. You also want to create a safe space in the home and outside of the home where You can talk with them about what's concerning them or what they're feeling, but also validate their emotions. So a lot of times what we do is we tell kids to tell us how they feel. We don't validate their emotions. And then you want to do things like, if they're struggling, encourage play dates, right? Find other children who have similarities to them. Not only your kids, the friends of your friends' children. Find other children that they may get along better with for their personality type.
Right.
Then you also want to have them interact at school. Ask the teacher, how do you see my child when it comes to their peer-to-peer contact? Because maybe the teacher could also suggest some positive things that they could see that they can work on. And then you want to have activities, as simple as reading a book with your child that has stories about friendship, how know how to describe what good friendships are. All of those things can help any child who is navigating friendship struggles, because we know that if you emphasize things like taking turns, sharing during family playtime, and explaining to them that friends expect the same good behavior, we know that that will help curb things like impulsivity in children and help beneficial for them in the long term with peer conflict.
Okay. And speaking of that, conflict resolution is a thing that I don't know if I'm stepping out on a limb here to say it, but we tend to struggle with, generally speaking, in our culture. And we see evidence of that, in a lot of different ways. How can children be encouraged to resolve conflicts in a healthy way, especially with friends?
Right. One of the first things is it starts with what we call positive reinforcement, right? Where we're praising children when they exhibit the positive behavior, such as resolving conflicts, such as communicating their feelings, and giving them different perspectives in which they could model good behavior. I think it starts with that first. And then I think you add to it by teaching them things like active listening, because we have to learn conflict resolution over time with developing brains, right? So as children grow, they understand a little bit more about how do we add another level to conflict resolution. So if you're teaching them things like how to manage their emotions and respond calmly and practice things like mindful behavior, I know we say it as adults, but even for children, which is, did you take a time out before you respond, or know when to walk away from something, or did you give them a chance to say their side, their perspective to what's happening? And so all those things can help teach your child how to negotiate too, right? Find a middle ground with everybody. Everyone's not always going to agree, and you're not always going to have your own way. And teaching them things like that will help encourage healthy conflict resolution at their age. And then sometimes what you can have your child do is to record their experiences after a conflict to help them organize their own thoughts and recognize triggers. I know it sounds very early to do that, but it can be very helpful for them as they age and grow to know what a trigger is and how to either avoid situations where your triggers are kind of ignited, or to figure out how to deal with them once they are. So all of those are things that you can do to help encourage those conflict resolution as they grow in age.
Yeah. Some people, because of life experiences or just, the way they are naturally, they are built for navigating conflict relatively easily. Like I had a conversation recently with my wife. I hope I don't get in trouble for this. But I tell her that sometimes having a conflict with her, it feels like I'm in a courtroom and I'm like in my first day of law school, and I'm having a conflict with someone who's a veteran that's been 20 years of operating in law. And I say that only to say that, you do have those sort of circumstances where some people, just because of whether it's life, the way God built them, they just kind of come in built for that, and others who are not built for that. And then therefore you have this interesting dynamic that you have to kind of learn and work through. So yeah, like I said, I know that's a key one. Especially because you need to learn it. If we can learn it early, I imagine we can curb a lot of the issues that we see in our society, in our country at large, even that what we're looking at now. You mentioned a little bit earlier about getting kids involved in different kinds of activities. Obviously, one component of the school life is extracurriculars. So, what are the benefits of kids being involved in extracurricular activities? And how can parents and children together choose the right extracurricular activities for them?
One of the things I think extracurricular activities help improve is it actually enhances academic performance. We see a lot of times that students who participate in activities they enjoy may improve their brain function,
Mm-hmm.
which can help them concentrate more, which can improve their grades. We know for sure it teaches them time management. I can think of a few clients I have right now who talk about how they manage their schoolwork. And depending on the level at which they are within the classroom, right? Some of them are in advanced classes or
Mm-hmm.
AP classes or IB classes. And so they have to manage that with their extracurriculars. And so it teaches them that at a very early age. How do I get all of this stuff done that I want to do?
Mm-hmm.
It helps them work on those social skills because now you have friends from diverse backgrounds who may not all be from my school.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to learn to navigate this because this is similar to what the world is like, right? It's not just like the people in my school. I now get a different space of people that I have to learn and personalities. Extracurriculars can also be stress release from academic pressure. So it allows the child to pursue their interests, their hobbies, or even develop new and creative ways that they didn't know that they had. So tapping into some things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the most important one I love that happens from extracurricular is it builds self-esteem. Because when a child excels in an activity, they feel a sense of accomplishment. It boosts their confidence. And that confidence can also be translated to better academic performance. So they go hand in hand. I feel that as a kid, as a child gets older, they should always have an extracurricular activities incorporated with their academics. And it doesn't have to be something that's a very big time constraint, but something that allows them to have something fun, in addition to something that provides with their academic performance space. So it gives them a lot of balance for themselves.
And so how can parents and children, because I imagine it should be kind of a team effort, but how do you come to a conclusion on what's the right extracurricular activity for your kid?
I think it comes down to interest. Interest is the first thing. Make sure it's something your child enjoys. What are their passions? I know a lot of times parents want to live vicariously through their children, but a lot of times you need to make sure that is that something that is of the interest of the child as well, because we've all known times where our parents have tried to get us in the thing they're into. We're like, yeah, that's not really my thing. So make sure it's something they also will enjoy. And I know sometimes children don't always know what's best for them, but you could tell the difference between a child who's being lazy versus a child who's interested in something. And I think parents have to pay attention to that. Extracurriculars should also be something that is a strength for a child. So it's something they can excel in, something that helps them build up their confidence, right? It shouldn't be something that adds more of that pressure that they feel that this is something I'm going to be good at. It should also be something what the child wants to get out of the activity is a goal for them as well. Like maybe they like the extracurricular because it allows them to make friends, because maybe they don't get to fit in at school. Or maybe it's something that, like I said before, builds their confidence. Figure out what the goal of the extracurricular is. Then the most important thing is make sure it fits in their schedule. So as your child ages and grows, let's say you have a child from primary school or elementary school who's going to high school, the extracurricular has to fit and find balance with their academic performance, because as we know, as they age in school, they're going to need more time for academic performance. So they cannot necessarily have, let's say, it's a sport that requires you to be there 7 days a week and twice a day. So morning, go to school, and then after, sometimes that might be too much. So make sure it is something that fits for them.
Yeah. I mean, I think a big portion of that too is knowing your kid, understanding what their needs, their goals, their interests are. And I think that'll help to go a long way in helping to navigate that conversation as to what is the best fit for them.
Yeah. So it has to be something that goes beyond, I would feel, the classroom. So don't think of just an academic space. Think of something that teaches them a concept that goes beyond something they may get in traditional school.
Right.
So if you have a child who is maybe in a learner-centered classroom, right? Maybe you put them in a physical education space for the extracurricular. So you find a level of balance.
Right.
So figure out what works for them. Or maybe they're creative and their school is really academic but not creative. So you put them in a music or art program. So something else that enhances the different levels of learning.
Yeah, and brings out the balance. All right. We are having a great conversation thus far with Dr. Edrica Richardson, also known as Dr. E. We are going to take a quick break for some words from our sponsors, and we will be right back on the Doctor's Hospital podcast.
Are you seeking exceptional healthcare beyond the traditional hospital setting? Introducing Doctors Hospital Clinics, your trusted destination for comprehensive care. Our full-service locations provide affordable services through our Loyalty Advantage membership program and NHI. Experience seamless care with our integrated health system, where your medical history travels with you, ensuring continuity of care. Book an appointment today at clinics.doctorshosp.com. We make primary care easy.
Welcome back to the Doctor's Hospital podcast. We are being joined today for another part of our Back to School series by Dr. Edrica Richardson. We've been having a great conversation thus far. I want to jump back in, kind of just piggybacking off of our last question before the break. And I think you started to mention it a little bit, is this concept of burnout. Because I think sometimes, we as parents, we as adults, have a clear understanding of what burnout looks like, feels like for us, right? But I don't think we always conceptualize well that our kids also are at risk for burnout in similar ways, even at their age level. Because we look at them, we're like, oh, they have so much energy, but they still are at risk for burnout in much the same way that we are. So, how would you advise a parent to find balance for their kids between school as it pertains to school itself, homework, extracurricular activities, and just what that looks like in order to avoid burnout?
I think we just have to keep in the forefront of our minds that extracurricular activities provide an outlet for students to release their stress and have fun. It should not just be some space where they're continuing to add that competitive pressure, right? I do know that there are some competitive sports, but I find that even a lot of my clients who are in competitive sports do it for the enjoyment of it, not necessarily for the fact that they have to win, right? They're going to win in their minds because they just love doing it, but they don't feel that pressure of, if I don't win, then my parents are going to be disappointed in me. And I think parents also have to make sure that they're navigating their reaction to it when maybe their child isn't always number one at something that is their extracurricular, because they are really supposed to be doing that extracurricular for a release, right? It should not be something that's going to add to it. And so when you want to try to help your child find balance, again, remember to set limits to them, to their commitments. Allow them to take breaks when they need to. Maybe you even start planning ahead for them so that they could be really realistic of some of their commitments. And parents should also, don't be afraid to tell your child, no, like, I think you're doing too much. I think kids are at a place where they're in such a competitive space at school that you want to make sure that extracurricular is not too much for them. It really should be stress relieving.
Right. You're right. I've heard parents who say that, they started their kids off in a couple of different things to kind of figure out like what was best suited for them. So they might put them like, in piano, that's once a week, and like a STEM program at school that may be once a week. And you kind of, if you're not quite sure of where your kid is particularly interested, you kind of do things like that where it's not so intense. But I also think about things like if you already know that your kid has like an entrepreneurial spirit, then putting them in something like junior achievement might be a really good idea, because you kind of help to lean into that space a little bit more. And perhaps it still gets to be that fun thing for them because they just enjoy kind of exploring that space. But also, there is an element of competitiveness because you do compete against other groups and things like that. And it also exposes you to the diversity, because if you're in a private school, then you get to interact with kids from government school as well, and vice versa. And so all of those things then become a benefit. So, it is that, I think, as with all things, like, we have to find balance as adults, and we have to ensure that we help our kids to find balance as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think you mentioned earlier, you just have a keen eye between whether it's laziness or it's just something where they're genuinely not interested and it's just not the right fit.
And I think parents have to be honest about that. Like, I feel like a lot of times we can forget that they are their own person with their own personality. So the thing that we might have enjoyed growing up, they may not have that affinity to. I can think about a client particularly whose parent was into track and field, and their rite of passage was that every child had to do some track.
Mm-hmm.
And my client got to a place where she's just like, I really don't like this. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have the hard conversation with your father about it, because that was his dream. And
Mm-hmm.
yours is right now, you are so creative and you love that creative space. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure if you talk to him in terms of that, he'll get it.
Yeah.
And so parents got to be open to when kids come to you to say that, hey, it's not that I don't want to do anything. I just want to do your thing.
Right. And that's important. And then to not be so hurt by them not wanting to do your thing, because your thing was your thing.
Yeah.
And allow them to find their own thing. It's interesting. We talked a little about the outside space, but to pull it back into the school environment a little bit, bullying is a thing that's, for lack of a better phrase, it's always existed, right?
Yes.
I do feel like there is, as with everything, things evolve, and it feels sometimes nastier and worse than it was when I was a kid. But how do you as a parent help to navigate, what advice would you give to a parent who's trying to navigate their kid dealing with bullies, or if their kid is the bully?
Yeah. I think the first thing we have to do is understanding what bullying behavior is. A lot of us grew up in situations where we were bullied either in our households, by our extended family, or outside our households, and we think that's normal. And we have to first understand that maybe we were subjected to some inappropriate behavior. And so bullying behavior is when you feel insecure about something, either because somebody is picking on you emotionally, physically, or otherwise. We know that one of the things we have to see is we have to check on and change a child's behavior and their attitudes toward it. So the first thing a parent has to do is understanding what bullying is. We have to define that. Then we have to understand if we're going to help our kids navigate through that, we have to let them know that it's not okay. And understand that there are consequences, whether you are bullied at home, school, in the community, or otherwise. And then we want to teach them to report it. We want them to understand that they should be able to go and tell a teacher, a guidance counselor, principal, or even their parent that this thing is happening to them without fear of any reprimand for just speaking up for themselves. We want to communicate with the school, let's say if it's happening at school, so that administrators can develop an action plan, right? So they can know how to maybe separate the children if it's happening with that, or even the staff members, because sometimes we know some teachers too are bullied. We want to interrupt that bully as best as we can by participating in more positive activities, involving them in other stuff. Again, we want to keep the lines of communication open. If you find that it is your child that is bullying, I think the first thing you have to do is, before you try to figure out and navigate your own personal stuff with it, figure out what's going on with your child first. Why they feel like that is the only way for them to communicate or get some level of attention, because we know bullying is attention-seeking behavior. And it is usually done to somebody they feel who is a little less than them with self-esteem and confidence, less than them with physical features. And they're trying to exploit that in order to be the center of attention. And so if we engage and encourage also the bystanders to help and support and teach them healthy behaviors and healthy friendships, I think that we have a chance at fixing this. I think we tend to say that it keeps getting worse because now the means for bullying has changed. Not all bullying takes place face-to-face anymore. Bullying can take place, we know a lot of times in this generation, it's more electronic. So maybe you're isolated from the WhatsApp group, or according to my last group of preteens, they said it's not WhatsApp. They use some other messaging software. I can't remember at this time. So you got to figure out what that is. What's the latest software they're communicating
there's
on?
Signal, there's Telegram, there's Discord, there's Twitch. If you're into gaming, there's also channels in that space. There's a lot. Yeah. There
are so many means. So parents got to figure that out. And parents have to monitor socials. If you're not interested in having to monitor socials, don't allow your children on them, because you do not know what they're being subjected to.
Right.
And then pay attention. We find that any child who's bullied starts to have very sullen behavior. They start disliking things they once enjoyed. And especially a big standout is, let's say your child enjoyed the extracurricular, but they no longer want to go. The question is why, right?
Yeah.
And you might have to do a little probing to figure out what that is.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think a lot of it does surround having the appropriate conversations with your kid, and also trying to engage the schools. Now, I have a lot of friends who have kids, in primary and high school space. And one of the things that I've heard a couple of people complain about is, my kid came to me about a thing. And when, the person said, well, I asked my kid, hey, what did the teacher say? Did you tell the teacher? And the kid replied, well, the teacher told me that I had to stand up for myself. And I think that's a troubling kind of conversation to hear, because you would expect that the school would be as interested in curbing bullying behavior as the parent or the child would be. So how can schools and parents and perhaps people that work in the profession like you together work to bring about a culture that discourages bullying in the school environment? Because I do find that in hearing people who have, and this is from a couple of different schools, where it's just like, well, yeah, that's what the people say, is like the kid just needs to stand up for themselves, and the parent just sits there like, what am I supposed to do?
Right. I think one of the first things is that parents have to become more involved. I mean, involved beyond just looking at the schoolwork to see whether or not your child is doing or performing well.
Mm-hmm.
But get involved by volunteering or participating in school events, so your face, your presence is known. And so that offers a different viewpoint too, with experiences. We know that parents who are more involved in school, their children are less likely to be bullied because they take on that leadership role and promote respect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a level of inclusion that allows the bullies to kind of shy away from their children. Other things that we can do is that make sure that your school that you're going to send your child to has a bullying prevention plan.
Mm-hmm.
Most now should have one in place, and what are their steps for how they're going to do it. It goes beyond just telling a child to stand up for themselves, because depending on the child's personality, they may be unable to do that. And so this is where then the parent steps in, and after you ask your child, well, how did you navigate that relationship?
Mm-hmm.
Here's some next steps that we both can take. So even if I send you back to say, hey, why don't you go and talk to the administrator versus the teacher,
Mm-hmm.
that you're still being a part of the process rather than sending them to do it by themselves.
Right.
And I really hope that all schools who have not have had some anti-bully training for their staff.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things we know is that a lot of people don't understand, again, what bullying behavior is. And even that comment back from a teacher is bullying behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, I had a friend of mine who was like, the next time I'm going to tell my kid, they'll start swinging. And this is kind of the challenge of, if you leave it sort of in that environment where it's not really checked, this is kind of how you potentially open the door for more physical interactions and encounters and things like that. And it's not healthy and it's not helpful. And it isn't, going back to our earlier point, It doesn't really help with conflict resolution.
Again, remember you said before that adults also need to be retrained in conflict resolution. So, maybe a lot of us could use a refresher and what that is.
Yeah. All right. So, the refresher point is a good one. And it does a lot of this does come around to the concept of communication, right? So as we wrap up, I know I still have a 6-year-old. She still loves to come and say, mommy and daddy, this happened today, or, we did this at school, or my friend did this, or we were playing this game. But I know from having friends and family members who have older kids that at some point that gets to be a quite a different environment. So what are some effective ways that parents can maintain open communication with their kids, especially as they go from kids to preteens to adolescents and throughout that journey? Because I know sometimes it gets complicated along the way.
I think some things parents can continue to do is, I know I said earlier that modeling changes, but they can constantly continue to model behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're demonstrating that appropriate behavior and that appropriate empathy, that goes a very long way with kids, no matter what their age is. And so, because one of the things that happens naturally as your child ages and grows is that the type of communication changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you're keeping that open line of communication there, that you can tell them about some things that you've navigated through and how you've worked through it. I think what helps children more than anything is seeing how you did it and hearing it, but also seeing it in reality. Because if you are telling them, oh, they should get along with others, but you aren't getting along with maybe your siblings or your friends, then they're probably not going to take your advice seriously. So you got to remember, you have to be the role model you want your kids to follow. Then you want to encourage that different perspective taking. Ask them questions, paraphrase what others say, and try to be open to another viewpoint. It is possibly that you don't know the context in which they're talking about to see. Maybe there is something different than when you went through it back in your day, because we know your day doesn't exist anymore. Again, it's practicing that active listening without any type of judgment, right? So you want them to have a space where they could come talk to you, where you could validate their emotions. You could show them how you are kind and compassionate, and so that they can follow that with others. And a lot of it goes when we start to provide them opportunities to practice. I think at the end of the day, it all comes back down to how are you allowing them to practice the behaviors, no matter what their age is, for what you want to see modeled. You cannot just tell them about it, but not actually show them that it can happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think the phrase is kids will do what they see, not what you say.
Absolutely.
And it's important to bear that in mind. Because if you're not modeling it, then they're not seeing it, right? You can't tell someone be nice and then they never see what being nice looks like from your perspective as, you know, the primary influence in their life. So I think that's a fitting point to remind people as we end off. You know, they will do what they see, not necessarily what you say.
Absolutely. And so they are paying attention. I can tell you, clients can always tell me a lot of things that are happening around them, even if they're not talking about it.
Yeah, kids don't miss much.
No.
We have to give them more credit than we do sometimes as adults. They don't miss much.
Yeah.
All right. I want to thank you so much, Dr. E, for joining us on the Doctors Hospital podcast today. It's been a great conversation. I'm going to allow you to plug whatever you want as we wrap up. I know, like I said earlier, you have a book that just recently came out. And then where can people get in contact with you if they wanted to set up a time or a session, if they wanted to speak with you?
So, yes. The first thing is, yes, I did have a book that was just released back in March of this year. It is called This Isn't Working for Me. It is a very practical guide of making every relationship in your life more fulfilling, intentional, and authentic. So as we were talking today, if you find that you need to work on any of your relationships, please grab a copy. It's locally at Da Vinci Innovators and Printing right in Village Road Plaza. So you can pick up a physical copy from there and they're all signed. Or you can find it on any platform, Amazon, Walmart, Pezzy, any place books are sold, Audible, because it's an international published book, so you can find it anywhere.
Nice.
And then you can reach me by going to my website, www.rpc-ltd.com. Again, it's rpc-ltd.com. It has all my links to my social media, as well as the phone contact, which is 425-0718. So you can schedule an appointment, but learn more about the different services we offer.
Awesome. Sounds good. So thank you again very much. And for our listeners, as always, we invite you to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And we will see you back here next week on the Doctors Hospital podcast.
Are you seeking exceptional healthcare beyond the traditional hospital setting? Introducing Doctors Hospital Clinics, your trusted destination for comprehensive care. Our full-service locations provide affordable services through our Loyalty Advantage membership program and NHI. Experience seamless care with our integrated health system, where your medical history travels with you, ensuring continuity of care. Book an appointment today at clinics.doctorshosp.com. We make primary care easy.